Hey guys, welcome out to Manna Monday, and I think we're up to number 8, and good to be back. It's been a little while, and so have my wife here with me tonight, and we're doing part 2 of the interview with her. And I want to just begin with a little bio, I suppose, in that little intro. We've been married for 24 years. We've been in ministry for now 14 years, and we have 3 kids that are all saved, living for God, doing well. And we want to talk a little bit today about raising kids, life in ministry, and from a wife's perspective largely, and how that all played out in life and in ministry. And so I want to just go back a little in time. 2006, the first Sydney conference. We were launched out of the Sydney conference into the local Sydney area, if you call it local, Windsor. I thought actually God has a funny sense of humor. It's as far west as you could possibly go. And when I got saved, I said I would never live or go any further west than Anzac Parade. And so if you know where that is, over there on the eastern suburbs, it's just like a kilometre from the beach. And I said I'd never go any further west than that. We end up pioneering and living in Windsor. But anyway, here we are, 8 years here in Hurstville, living the dream. And I've got my greatest asset with me here tonight. And so we're going to get some insights from life and ministry and motherhood and those kinds of things. And so anyway, 2006, planned it out. And so I want to ask you the question tonight. What did you think, or what was going through your mind? How does a wife receive that, handle that, process that? Because for me, I guess it was just, it's the will of God and we're doing this. And so anyway, let's...
So I guess for me, I saw my role was just moving to another area, really, as a wife and a mother. And I think as a Christian, God calls us to love people anyway, serve people regardless. And so I did that because that was who we are as Christians. We love people and we serve people. I know Jesus, and I want as many people to know Jesus like I know Jesus. And so there was no effort ever in loving people and serving people. And in terms of...
That's interesting, because it probably wasn't my experience of pioneering.
Well, no, we hadn't got to the pioneering yet. But in terms of going and pioneering somewhere else, I was, obviously my kids were my first thought. So I only had Luke at school, but we found a house. I chose the school, and we found a house from where we found the school, and obviously prayerfully chose the school, and doing those kind of things. And I like to have fun. And when we went out to pioneer, Pastor Walsh said, "Make sure you guys go and have fun." So I was on a mission to have fun. You're a little bit more serious than...
It was not fun. Well, at least...
It was fun for me.
Yeah. Well, that was the first 6 months was not fun. And largely because I made it that way, that I was so tense and so, I tried to make it like the Parramatta church. Everything had to work and everything had to be, fine-tuned, and everything just be perfect. And so, but it just wasn't, and nothing was. And it just didn't go according to plan. Although God brought people and people got saved, but it was just... because I was so highly strung, it was like...
But that was only you.
Yeah,
the
just
kids
me.
and I
It was
actually
me.
had fun. You made us laugh a lot, actually.
Well, it wasn't until 6 months into it, then I think you said to me at one point, well, at least that's a funny story that you
can preach one day.
You can preach about that one day.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until then that I went, oh, yeah, I would at least laugh about that. Because there were so many things that in my own personality, it was not funny. Because I take ministry seriously, right? And so it just wasn't funny. And do you remember any of those things?
Yeah, I remember lots of them. I remember, this would be very uncommon that anyone would think this of you or I, but we were in this first church service and I misunderstood. I overheard you having a conversation with a fellow pastor before you kind of went out, and he was saying, you know, when you preach a sermon, write the names of who on the top of it. So that's all I caught of the conversation. But in my mind, he was saying, so when you just keep preaching that until that was my perception of what he was saying. So we had our first service and we were kind of having a practice run, started the song service, and I was up the back and someone walked in and I was like, oh, hi. And then, but as he saw me, he was walking backwards, clapping back out the door. I'm like, no, please stay.
The singing's not that bad, trust me.
And I walked back in and I said, oh, there's a reason for this and a reason for that. He goes, are you serious? What is your problem? And then I'm like, okay. He goes, no, we're going to do this anyway. And so I sat down and I don't know whether the girls were kind of sitting, Chloe was in the pram and Luke was in the front, like on this computer for the slides. And you started preaching and I don't know where this came from, and I didn't mean it in a way, but I was like, oh, don't preach to me. And thinking that you're going to preach the same sermon every week until someone came, and you just like snapped, which is very uncommon. You never did this. And so you're like, your job is to sit in that chair, take whatever I serve you with a smile on your face. And we can't take you serious when you snap. So Luke's laughing. We're all sitting there, we're all laughing.
I was manifesting. They're laughing, I'm manifesting.
And
well, no, but what made it worse was you said something like, there's a reason Hillsong plant them out 50 people at a time.
No,
and I'm like,
but I wasn't saying that what we do is wrong. I was just saying, oh, that makes it really easy, you know, because there's people around.
I'm thinking, that doesn't really help me right here, right now. We got no people. I'm preaching to the chairs, and you're killing me.
But Luke and I regathered and you know, composed ourselves, and thank God that was our first and only service actually where we didn't have people. Yeah. So I think God saved me and you.
By the way, if you have any questions or comments, just send those through on the live chat and we'll do our best to answer those. But I remember another time we got into it a bit with pioneering and we had people coming, and we probably had more kids in the nursery than adults in the church service. And Joanne was spending every single service in nursery. And so she's minding these kids, and these were
like babies up until like kids' church, so that especially untrained kids, you know, 6, 7, 8, they're still very, you know, distracting in the service.
I was very polite. I was trying to find a way to say these are somebody else's children, so I want to be very nice about that. But that was good.
Thanks.
These were very difficult children.
So I would have like up to 9, 10 kids in there, and you might have 3, 4, 5 adults in the service.
Yeah, so we're there one service and I'm preaching. I'm, you know, in one sense having a good time. I'm preaching, I'm doing my thing. I had about 3, 4, 5 adults and no kids, no distractions, going very good. And you know, I'm preaching probably, I don't know, 15 minutes or whatever.
It was long enough, whatever it was.
The building had these concertina things that you could pull them across and like divide the building, not quite in half, but 3/4. And so we pulled the concertinas across, and the back half was the nursery. And so she's in there with the nursery, about 9 or 10 kids. I got 4 or 5 adults. I'm preaching. And so anyway, while I'm preaching, I'm either getting to the end or to the end, and I see the concertina things open, and Joanne just sticks her hand through, and she's holding her watch, and she's just going like this, time, you know, and she's saying, hurry up. And so
I think it was a bit more rapid than that. I was like, hurry up.
Why is she waving her watch at me? What's the deal? I said, I just press. She's like, I'm here with all these kids.
I'm
Get
dying.
Me out of here.
Anyway, there is definitely a sacrifice, I think, as a wife when you're going to go and pioneer. But I think the main thing that you have to know is that your relationship with God is your own, and that you can sustain yourself with your own relationship.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't get services for weeks.
Yeah, it's true. And maybe another story. I remember another time we so we clean the building ourselves, and so Joanne's there cleaning the building, and then so she locks the keys inside the building. And in those days, we used a trailer to carry all the gear from home to the building, and then put it all back in the trailer and take it home. It's a bit of a job, and so anyway, she's there. I've gone, taken the trailer down, unloaded all the gear, set up the church building, parked the trailer out the front, the car and the trailer out the front.
It was the mid-break.
Sorry?
Like it was the break between services. Yeah.
So she's gone down there during the day, I think cleaned the building, and then come out, jumped in the car, and just forgot there's a trailer on the back. And she just totally jackknifed the trailer, and the trailer's hit the side of our car and dinted all up the side of the car.
I didn't even know.
And she's like, I come out, what the heck? What happened to our car? She's like, oh, I forgot. There's a trailer. And then, and by the way, I locked the keys inside the building, and then we had to call the security, and it was like $150 to get the key back out. It was just one of those days. And I think mentioned that we were talking to Pastor Walsh about that, and Pastor Walsh goes, what did he say to you?
You were trying to push him off the edge or what?
What are you trying to do to the guy? And so anyway.
I actually went down to clean it because they hadn't cleaned it properly. They had a party the night before and it smelled, and I thought I was doing a good thing. And when I locked the door, and it was a big drama, and then I jackknifed the trailer. I didn't even hear that. and you couldn't come down because we had the kids were asleep because they were little. It was crazy.
Anyway, the reason we're telling those stories really is to get back to how a wife processes those times and works through that and manages the kids and does all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think obviously, I gleaned almost everything that we did from my pastor's wife. And I think to successfully release your husband, you actually have to release your husband. So you have to, be independent in a sense of, the world these days tells the girls, oh yeah, the husband has to help, and the husband, but we can really be, we really don't need that much help, and
preach it.
And I was able to release you to go and do outreach when the kids were sick or running around doing sport things and their own activities, and release you at whatever was needed, and tried to make it so that there was no pressure on you from the kids. Mind you, you also made sure you made time for the kids. Yeah. And so that was a big factor. You always made sure that, they had fun. You were Steve Irwin, and, whatever else you had to be and do. We made sure we made pioneering fun. Yeah. And
I will add to that. I was working a full-time job. Yeah. School teaching at high school for all of those years of pioneering, 3 years. And so it was important to make time for my wife, make time for the kids, and to, the kids are small, and so yes, pretend to be Steve Irwin, and Luke and I would go out into the bush and sometimes take the girls, and we would run, and Luke had a motorbike, and we'd ride motorbikes, and we'd catch lizards and see snakes, and it was like, oh, crikey, look at that, and so, we did all that stuff, and we loved it. We had a ball, and we had a great time.
I think you have to be resourceful, though. I think if you have to have a good, solid relationship with God and not be needy, I guess, if you're releasing your husband to ministry.
Tell us a bit more about what that looks like for those who are thinking of pioneering and maybe thinking about life ahead, and what does that look like in terms of what is the sacrifice? How much time do you really actually get to spend with your husband, and how did you feel about that?
I never really gave it much thought. Like, I was just doing what God wanted me to do. I tried my hardest not to need you on the day-to-day with the running of the home and the kids. And I spent a lot of time like in prayer for you, for the kids, for the church. But I think one of the things that we would spend time, and I would be, because I think to successfully raise your kids in any environment, you have to know your kids. You have to watch them. You have to work out who they are, and you've got to pray for them, and you've got to get in their heads, and you got to live basically in their head. And like one of the sayings I used to say to my kids, like I could see things going through Abby's head, and I go, "Don't even think about it." And then she would look at me, and I'm like, "Don't even think about it. I know exactly what you're thinking. Don't even think about it." And then I go, "Just remember, it's my job to know you." And so, but then when we get a chance to sit down, I would tell you what I'm seeing, what I think they're struggling with, and kind of, so we would be on the same page. So you didn't get the quality time with the kids, but you were able to navigate them on me praying and being in their heads and all that sort of stuff. And so you would ask questions, you would ask the right questions, knowing what I was seeing was a struggle and things like that.
Yeah, I think that does highlight the importance of a praying wife, and not just someone who prays, but someone who really sees that as their ministry. And I think that's critical for a pioneer couple, even a discipleship couple, any couple, Christian couple, that the wife's job, the wife's role is to release her husband to ministry, and then her job is to be a praying wife who really dials into the life of their children, her husband, family, and I'm blessed to have that. But that ought to be the goal of every couple, every family, every household, that a wife would emulate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so so Marty's just asking a question here. He's saying, is there footage of those first few song services?
No.
No. We did have, but yeah, I don't think I would release that if there was. It was funny though, because you got to understand this. We're diverting a little bit here, but understand, I never did music at all, not even at school.
Gosh, that was a fight.
No music at all. And I don't know why, but it was a shock to me when Pastor Walsh said to me one day, but years before I went out to Pioneer, he said, "So what are you going to do for a song service?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know, I'll learn guitar or play backing track or something." And I got a guitar and I learnt 4 chords, but just was never going to work. So backing tracks. But then backing tracks we only had like 8 tracks maybe back then, and when it was played off an old PDA device.
Which was modern.
Back then it was. That was like the modern technology, and I hardly even knew how to use it. But that got kind of old quickly, and so Joanne, she could play keyboard a little bit when she was younger, and so I can play keyboard. So she picked that up again and started playing keyboard. So we started doing live song service, but I think we had some difficult times.
Yeah, we definitely had.
Song
service was something to witness. But so you got to understand with the keyboard, and when you're pioneering, so you're getting your drum beat off the keyboard, and you're backing everything.
Me I've got to understand this?
No,
is that what
you never did? You never did. But so, and then so with songs, if you have any musical idea, when you're playing the songs, I could fill in a song quite easily. Like once I knew the chords, I could fill it in and feel the music, so to speak. And so then you would go from one
Let's
verse
sing it again.
or to a chorus without a bridge when the song had a bridge. And you go, "No, I don't care. You just make me look good." And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. You can't get to that without the bridge, especially when I'm having to change the drum beat on the keyboard. No,
I don't know about it. Just make me look good.
Yeah, that's what you kept saying.
That's every musician on the platform. Your job is to make the song leader look good. If he messes up, you fix it. If he gets it wrong, you fix it.
That's great if you have all the music instruments just to stop and start.
But
yeah, but you don't. It's a pre-recorded. We're
Okay,
going to get
sing-
heated.
Let's sing that chorus. She's looking at me going, no, we can't. I'm like, yes, we can. No, we can't. It's okay,
But
all right, stop
you know,
then.
for all the comedy of that, the biggest comedy is, you know, our kids. I mean, I don't know if they even remember our song services, but people would come and they'd be weeping in the song service, and they'd come up and they'd go, "Thank you so much for that beautiful music." And I'm like, "What the heck? Like, there's nothing beautiful about that."
Hey,
But God,
hey.
but God came down and met with people
It
despite of
actually-
us.
I mean, we're talking about this a lot. We're kind of
Yeah,
wasting time here.
sorry.
But yeah, I remember one time I said, you know, I think I'm going to go, I think I'm going to get guitar lessons so we can do this. And she goes, why don't you get singing lessons? I'm like, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm trying my hardest here. I'm singing why don't you get singing lessons?
Well, I just figured if you were going to get lessons, get what we needed the most.
Anyway, we pressed on. And so,
And you got
anyway,
better. You got good.
Thank you. So when we went out to Pioneer, the kids, Luke was, how old was Luke?
He was 6,
He was
7,
6,
just turning
7, and
7.
Abby
4.
4, and
Chloe's
Chloe
1.
1.
Yeah.
And so we're there. Joanne is managing the 3 kids.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there was.
It was hard. It was hard. There was, you know, the it was all the ages where kids get sick. But you just can't, like for me, I just had to, like if I gave too much thought to those things, like, oh, you know, this is demonic and, you know, all those kind of like things that we think, it's just like, you know what, this is just having small kids. And, you know, sometimes it was more than, you know, like that I felt like I could handle. Like, you know, we all got glandular fever in the house, and at the same time, Chloe broke her arm and her leg, and we're in a revival, and I've got the pastor's daughter in a pram with a broken leg and a broken arm, you know, and I've got glandular fever and can't even sit upright, and you know, it's just insane. But you just get through those things, and you don't overthink it. You don't let it stress you out. Things like that.
So there's a good question here, which times in right now from Letitia. She says, "What was it that made ministry fun?"
I think we just made sure that we had lots of family time, and I love to laugh. So actually, I love to laugh at you, which is which is really bad. But because you're so serious, okay. So then, when I got saved, I felt like I was in the fire for years, and I didn't really have a relationship with my dad that I could just trust God straight away. But you know, you were the firstborn Italian child, and you were Dad's golden child. And so, you know, you couldn't do anything wrong in your dad's eyes. And so when you know, when we say, "Oh, God said this," it's like, "Yep, no worries." I'm like, "What do you mean, yep, no worries? Like, aren't you stressed? Aren't you struggling? Don't you not trust him?" You know, and I didn't recognize that as a time, but I thought, wow, do you even go through trials? Like, why did I need so much refining? And then you just get saved and you're right. But then when God started to really teach you just to love people as they come in, and because our Pioneer Days brought us some interesting people, colourful people, it sounds really bad, but I just really laughed at you a lot, and so did the kids.
So just to, again, we divert a little, but just to put you in the picture, it was things like, you know, in the song service, it started with a PDA and a backing track, and so Joanne's sitting in the congregation, so we're singing along, and she's just laughing.
Get excited.
Like,
I was excited.
she's excited, but I'm looking at it and going, "Why are you laughing at me? What the heck? What is it? You think it's that bad? What?" And so I'm inside me, I'm burning. I'm like, I can't believe you would sit there and laugh at me. And so then afterwards, I'm like, "What's your problem?" She goes, "What? It was good."
I was smiling and happy because he was singing in key. So I was like really excited. I'm like, "Wow, you're doing really good." And he's getting really angry at me, thinking.
I'm so annoyed.
And so anyway, those kind of things. But I think the kids made it fun. The kids' school, the relationships with people. I think if you just own where you're at,
Yeah.
You know, it makes it fun, and just making the most of all the opportunities. We tried to make sure we had a good home, you know, and like where we were living, and we weren't kind of like taking the worst of the worst. We made sure that our home was nice and that the kids had activities to do, and and we just really just tried to make it as fun as possible for them as well, and
I would also say
and
that
people.
And a lot of those things that we're talking about, especially in me, it was God had to break those pride. All of that was pride.
That's why I laughed,
And it
probably.
was pride, and so God had to teach me that. God had to show me that in the early, if I stayed like that, God would not have brought people.
Yeah.
And because God is not going to bring precious souls into that environment and you just ruin them. So God had to teach me that straight away. Well, mind you, we did have people right from the beginning.
Yeah, we did.
But God had to teach me that quickly, and in the first 6 months, it really was a steep learning curve, but I learnt some of those lessons quickly.
You were also very passionate. Like pioneering was not a hobby.
Definitely not.
You were very, and I think that's probably what made it fulfilling for me, because it was like, this is what we do, this is who we are, and we lived and breathed, you know, people. And when I say pioneering, it's not pioneering. We lived and breathed people. You know, we would do what we do, and that's another thing I think to make it fun and make sure it's successful, is that as a woman, as a wife especially, you have to learn very quickly to do what you do for Jesus.
Yes.
And not for people, and not for anything in return. And when you start learning that everything you do it for Jesus, it's much easier to do. And I remember pioneering, and I've told lots of ladies this, but when I was like so angry with this couple, and I was driving along, and I'm like, they don't even have enough respect to call us, and da-da-da. And when I just heard God say, how do you think I feel? It was like, oh, I took you away and put me there, and it just doesn't work. So even ministry in the local church doesn't work if you don't do it for God. If any of it is for you, or your worth, or your value, or look at me, if anything other than Jesus, it's not worth it.
I think we learned that lesson early, because there was another people in the church, and one guy in particular, and he was around for a while and saw people come and go, and people we served and loved and helped, and they left, and he then said, I feel sorry for you. And we, and he was saying that to us as a family. Say, I feel sorry for you. You do that for people, and then they treat you badly or whatever, or they don't come back. And so he was kind of saying, if that's what ministry is about, I don't really want that. But I was explaining to him, listen, I don't do this for them. I don't do it for you. And we do to serve people, but ultimately do it for Jesus. They're rejecting Jesus, not me. And we sleep well at night knowing we're doing the will of God. Whether they respond or not, yes, of course, we'd like them to respond and do well and be more polite or whatever. And not everyone was bad. There was lots of good people. But it's the bad ones that become a highlight. And so, but we just said, you know what, we're going to sleep well at night because we're going to know that we're doing the will of God.
Yeah. I think, you know, I mean, you still have your marriage, you know, you grow, we grow, we keep each other in a box of something that we were, and we outgrow that. And, you know, I think we went through, and then when you're learning ministry pressures, you had to learn not to put them onto me. And, you know, those kind of things. But they, you know, I had a good relationship with my pastor as well. And so if I was too heated, I'd call him, and he'll go, well, you're in 5th gear, let's bring it down to 1st gear, you know. And it was when you were having to put people out of church, and, you know, and just having relationships with, you know, my headship, my own personal relationship with them, and you always saying you always have access to that, and you never kind of put a stop to the fact that you have access to your pastor as well. I know that sometimes a lot of, you know, husbands are like, oh, why would you call pastor? It's like, well, he's my pastor, you know. And still, even though your husband you're covering, especially when you're pioneering, you sometimes need, you know, some correction from your pastor if you're not going to hear it otherwise.
Yep.
But I think predominantly for me, ministry really has been raising my kids. And it's probably just been the last few years that I've really felt more liberty to have more expression with people and in the church. Like when we first came here, you know, I pretty much, the first year was my role, I'm just selling my kids in. I didn't think about it, but at the time I didn't really give much thought or mindset to the church at all. It was just selling my kids, you know, into new schools and new routines and a new church, and, you know, praying and helping them to adjust into that. So then you don't really have to worry about that. You could have come in and just keep going with your role. And now I feel like, you know, the kids are older and moving out, and I have more. I do more for the church, definitely, and, you know, do what I can. But
Yeah, good. And I have a question here. Albert is asking, they say new levels, new devils, and so what types of new devils did you face when you stepped into pioneering as a wife, as a mother? What kind of...
I think definitely spiritual warfare. You know, if you're any kind of Christian, you understand a level of spiritual warfare, but it really heats up, and you have to be able to use the Word of God. 100%, you've got to be able to praise, because especially sometimes pioneering, the devil goes, oh, it's so lonely, no one understands, you're on your own, you don't get fellowship, you don't get a feeling from, you know, you don't get to catch up with people when you're at church and get refilled, or, you know, things like that. But you just had to be able to recognise, wow, this is just demonic, and put on praise music, read the Word of God. You know, I think we said it another time, but, you know, Chloe was like 2 and 3, and she's copying me walking around the house, and she's in the shops and walking around the house, and she's like speaking in tongues. She's copying me, because I sometimes would just be walking around, and it was definitely when real people started getting really saved and he was actually really pastoring, was when there was a real, you know, assault. But I do have a good relationship with God. I like to think I do, and I do like to pray, and God would give me insight to a lot of things. Like it was quite a spiritual place, Windsor, and there was a lot of spiritual activity, and I really felt like at times definite, you know, assault against the church, which, you know, we still get here. Doesn't matter on the size of the church, we get that here. Like, you know, like now when God's moving in our church, you know, it's heating up. The spiritual battle's definitely heating up.
Yeah, and I very much appreciated that insight. I remember one time there was a lady came to the church, and praise God, man, we got a visitor, that's awesome. And, you know, she looked a little weird, and, you know, lots of people looked weird out there, but she looked a little weird. She came in, oh, praise God. And after that, my wife comes up to me and she goes, she's a witch. Oh, what do you mean? No, that's not. No, she's a witch. I'm telling you, she's a witch. I know it. And so then this lady, then she comes back to me and she says, you know, oh, what are some things you've been facing here? What are some of your battles, and what are some things maybe we could pray for you? Yeah. And all the pieces kind of started to come together, you know, and sort of say weird things, and my wife's looking at me going, a witch. She's a witch. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Oh, I didn't see that.
She was asking very specific questions, like about what do you do, what's your goal, what's your aim, what can I pray specifically for you? And it was just bizarre. I
was just happy to have someone walk through the door. It was good, but anyway, we were glad to see her walk out of the door.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it was good. And so, okay, so tell us then a bit about what are some of the highlights? Well, you know, not only pioneering, but we also assisted Pastor Walsh in the Parramatta Church, which I think those years of ministry were amazing. They were invaluable. And then we've been here in Hurstville for 8 years, right? And so we're not just talking about the 3 years of pioneering, although they help people who want to pioneer. But in life, in ministry, as a mother, as a wife? What are some of the highlights for you? What makes life? What makes you tick?
Wow, that's a tough question.
The joy of ministry. What's the joy for you?
Is definitely, well, my biggest joy, my biggest mission, even if we never went out and partied, is to see my kids saved and living for God. And
Amen.
they're not all there yet, but they're saved and they're living for God. And we've still got one we're still raising. She's a gorgeous girl, but we're getting there. It's a plug for you, Chloe. But yeah, it's definitely my investment, my energy, and most of my prayer life goes into my kids, and did go into my kids and my husband. And I remember even before we got sent out, I used to just, one person said something I remember saying it to people as a Bible study leader's wife. The girls would come and they'd be complaining about their husbands all the time. And I'd be like, you know what? You want a good husband, you're going to pray for it.
Stop speaking negative about your husband. That's right.
Yeah, and there's a book, it's a bit, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but there's a section in it that says, shut up and pray. Shut up and pray, like not those words. But it just means I stop pulling them down and start praying. And the first, challenge is about praying as a wife, because, and I found more and more in ministry that the whole worldly perspective of what a man should be like, basically the world has made it so that a man has to serve you. This is just the opposite to God's creation. And in actual fact, if you're praying for your husband and they're really saved and they're serving God, they're going to love you, and you're going to want to serve them anyway because they're going to love you right.
Designed by God to be his help meet.
That's right.
There's a bit of a funny story with that, actually. Long before I was a pastor, as a disciple, I remember listening, and somebody preached and said to the woman, "You are his helpmeet." And I'm a brand new convert, and I'm thinking, why does he keep calling women a piece of meat? That's not very nice. Why does he? She's a piece of meat. She's his helpmeet. Thinking, what? I don't get that. And then later I realized, no, that doesn't mean a piece of meat. It means designed to meet his needs. She is designed to be his helper. And so then we got a bit of clarity, and then I understood. But anyway.
I think there's definitely, there's the genuine assault on the mind, and I think even you preached it yesterday. Grasping very quickly as a wife and a mum and ministry of any kind, whether it's in a local church or pastoring, that you just can't trust emotions.
Yes.
It sets you free as a Christian woman, that you just, when you get an emotion, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like this. And so I don't even let myself use that word most of the time. I stopped, years ago. And it's like, but I just feel. And I'm like, whoa, hang on. It's never going to. Yeah, so when I hear myself say the word feel, I'm like, okay, hang on, let's just dissect reality to how I feel right now. And have gotten better at that over the years. And so now I really feel like I'm quite balanced in that area, and I don't really have the highs and the lows of those emotions. Good.
I have a question here from Athena. She asked a great question. She says, was there a time early on where your kids did not want to know God or couldn't be bothered for church, etc.? And how did you deal with that as a Christian and a mother, especially as your husband is a pastor?
Not really, because we just made sure that it was fun.
Obviously, Luke, as a teenager, he had to work through that, right?
Well, Luke had to work through it, but he still... The hard thing for Luke, I think, was that he was in a good place, but he was more carnal, but in a good place. When we were in Parramatta, he was around friends. When we actually came here is when God started to challenge him a little bit more about, why is he here? Because he didn't have any friends. There was no one his age. You obviously see things in your kids. It doesn't stop. You have to get in their head, and so you can see these things, and you're just praying for the direction. And teenagers and kids go through the highs and lows and the moods, and it's very quick passing. But I think even with that, because church was their life, was our life, even if they didn't want to be a Christian, they still wanted to be in church. They still wanted to be around their friends and the people that they knew, and it was a fun life. Being a Christian wasn't boring. Like, my kids have never said, like, in fact, my kids have always said, oh my gosh, imagine how boring life would be if you weren't a Christian. And I think we kept it very real. Like, I'm a realist. I did work in emergency nursing, but, we'd go past someone that was, just high or just destroyed by drugs and alcohol. But, oh my gosh, I bet you they weren't like that all the time. They probably just made one decision one time to take something, and we would just talk about those kind of things. And when our kids from young, they would see people come in, and I guess as well because we were in ministry, and the people would be in our house and they would see the transformation. They'd be like, why would you want to be like they'd be like, I see people coming into church begging God to help them change their life. Why would I want to go out and try what's in there? Right. And so I think because we were actively involved, and there was always some degree of momentum in our lives, and there was always some people around that God was touching and changing, that there was always an element of interest, even when they had to come to a point like Luke was, where and Abby and even Chloe, like where they have to choose, between the world and God. There's something, far more exciting, in the world.
Yeah.
In the kingdom.
If a family or a mother has some young children that are not particularly interested in church, what can they do to help them know God?
I personally think that prayer is the biggest start. I think it starts with prayer, and then once you get into that kid's head in prayer, so you get God's perspective, because He's the one that created them. Because often I find that if you don't get into each child's head and you think it's a textbook for all kids, you raise them all the same. It's a big mistake. You've got to actually know how they think. And then I'm always, with all three of my kids, we would lie there and I would talk about something to do with God and my life, or something to do with God and your life, and how God's done something in me when I see them struggle with something. So when I see a struggle, I'm able to say, you know what, I had something like that, and God did this, or someone else's testimony, and give a story about how, and so even though they've not necessarily voiced what their concerns are, I'm kind of giving them, like I'm answering it. Like, even one example was just a few years ago, and quite a few years ago, it was like Abby came home and she goes, I think I might just go back instead of like go to Chloe's school farewell. And just straight away I got a check in my heart because I'd been praying for her. And we hopped in the car and I said, Abby, you're at an age now where like it's heating up. You're getting into new levels, and you're going to have to kind of make a choice. You're either going to serve God or you're not, because, your friendships are going to become more. Boys are going to pressure you. Things are going to happen. And she went back to school to actually see this person. And then that person saying, just keep it a secret from your parents. They won't need to know. And that conversation was God appointed. And she goes back and she said, you know what? No, I'm going to make a decision. I'm not going to deceive my parents. I don't go to church because they tell me. I want to be a Christian.
Amen.
And she came home, and that was a really big testimony for her that day. And so it's just like reading your kids. Like, that was a cue. I'd been praying for that, and then I saw her, and I read straight away. It's like, I know why you're going back. You're not going back to say goodbye to your friends. So.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll just chuck in a few little practicals as well. When the kids were, younger, we used to read with them every night. We'd read part of the Bible. We'd read books. We'd pray with them to go to sleep every night. We tried our absolute best to be the best possible example. There is no greater killer for children than hypocrisy.
Yeah, that's right.
And if your children see hypocrisy, they will not like Christianity. They will probably backslide.
True.
And so we tried our very best to be who we are, the same at church, the same at home, the same at work, and no two-face, no hypocrisy in us, and who we are is who we are, and we did not compromise. We made strong stands with alcohol. We not within ourselves. I stopped drinking like almost straight away when I got saved, and all those things. But we had family events, and we made strong stands, and we said no alcohol. There'll be none of that, and
We didn't have them for very long. They all stopped coming.
Yeah, but it sounds like a big thing to do and a hard thing to do. But listen, my 3 kids are saved today. And that is my priority, not to keep unsaved family happy and make sure that they can, bring their 6-pack of bourbon and Coke to the 1-year-old birthday party. No, you're not bringing that. And so, we made strong stands. We, again, we made life fun. We were always very, very positive about the church. We never, and here's another thing that'll help your kids to stay saved. Never speak badly about God, your relationship with God. Never speak badly about your relationship with your pastor. And never speak badly about your wife in front of your children. And never speak badly about the people in church in front of your children. Now, you may think some of those things, but if you want your children to be saved, and you might be struggling with your relationship with God, but you don't tell your kids that. And you might have issues with your wife, but you don't let your kids know that. You don't argue in front of the children. Don't fight in front of your children. Don't lose your testimony in front of your children. And a lot of people, they fight, couples fight, argue, and end up swearing, totally blow their testimony and all that in front of the kids. You think the kids are not gonna do that one day? And so they don't do what you say; they'll do what you do. And so you have to uphold the highest of testimonies and go to the extremes. And it's one of the reasons why we dress well for church. It's like this is the priority. This is important. This is what's important to us. And we never miss a church service. Or outreach, or a rally, or a conference. We never miss, because what we're saying to the kids is, this is important to us, and it needs to be important to you. And the minute you miss that, the kids say, well, look, Mum and Dad, when they're tired, they don't go to revival. Or it's cold. Mum doesn't go to outreach when it's cold. And so the minute they get a chance, they won't go either. And Sunday service will come around and they'll say, well, Dad had a big week at work this week, and so, he's got to mow the lawn, and so Dad doesn't go to church on Sunday. Dad missed church when he needs to do something, wash the car, mow the lawn, do something else, and so we won't go either.
I think I read a lot. I still do. I read a lot. And there's some books that I've read 3-4 times for when our kids were at separate ages. But I read from infancy, I read all through the toddler years, I read through the school years, I read through the teen years, right up. And I read and I gleaned off those things and kind of put it in place. And when I said getting into the kids' heads, it's kind of like you can, parenting it's not just yelling at your kid to do something. It's almost like inspiring them to do the right thing sometimes, and getting around them and inspiring them to be something or to do something through, through getting them to think it for themselves almost.
Yeah. And I want to just say this, that that when your children are small, let me say under 16, as for me and my house, we serve the Lord. They don't have a choice whether they come to church or not. None of my children had a choice. And so, and I say that with, if you're just raising your children to say, well, they can choose for themselves, just like they choose what shirt they're going to wear today, they can choose whether they come to church or not. No, the Bible says, train them up in the way they should go, that when they're old, they're not depart from the faith. And so I'm going to mold them into shape. And so when they're small, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I don't care what you have on, what you're doing, you're going to live in my house, you're coming to church. And so we have to then find a way to inspire them to want to do that. Sometimes it's going to be because I said so, but most of the time we want to inspire them to want to be involved. If they're not involved, though, you're coming anyway.
Which our kids really were.
Yeah.
But it comes with the not living a life of hypocrisy, and being a Christian 24/7, and being humble when when you get angrier than you should, to apologize to them, or if you misunderstand something that they were saying, it's okay to say, you know what, actually, I'm sorry. I didn't. But and teaching your kids when can you interrupt, when you can't, things like that, and making sure that they're not just like, that they're valued, their opinion is valued, but it's just when and how they share it.
Remember we had a rule when the kids were small, especially pioneering and then in Parramatta as well, but when they were small, when either of us were talking to somebody else, because it's important, when you're talking to visitors and things in a pioneer setting, the kids were not allowed to just run up and interrupt and, pull on your shirt, pull on your jacket, pull on your pants, or grab your leg. And so we had a rule that if the kids came up and they put their hand on your leg or on your shoulder, they just stand there and wait.
And you go like that.
And then we would be aware of that they need something, and then we would stop the conversation and say, yes, Abby, yes, Luke, yes, Claude, can I help you? And then we would answer their question, and then they could go off and do their thing. But they were not allowed to interrupt, and they knew that. And I think parents would be well served today to teach their children to stand still, have some manners, look people in the eye, shake hands, be respectful, and not interrupt you when you're talking to people.
Yeah, and eye communication is wonderful.
Yeah, look me in the eye, and look other people in the eye.
But our kids all knew what we were saying to them with a look.
Yep. Most of the
time.
Very good. All right. Well, we've got a couple of minutes. It's a couple of minutes to 8, and so we're just going to wrap this up. So we've talked through children, marriage, ministry. Is there any last comments that you might have for people, mums, wives, last piece of sage advice that you could give them before we close? Yes, there is. Come on.
I don't know what you're asking. No, but I think, well, my thing is pray a lot, read a lot, and if you are like, if you're raising kids, get to know each child's personality individually and raise them accordingly, because if you try and raise them all the same way, they just don't understand. Yep. Make them feel like they're...
To understand them.
Yeah, and make them feel like a lot of church kids kind of feel like they're pushed to the side. Actually, I had a pioneer's wife tell me recently, she said, you know what, you always stopped and made time for your kids. It doesn't matter where, when they were in the body and we were assisting and pioneering and things like that, she said, I just saw that you would drop anything to make sure you gave your kids time, because they were my disciples. And so, and I never even saw that I did that, but she said, I just remember it, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. They weren't like, I'm sorry, I'm too busy at church. No, it's like, no, you know, they were just as needy at church, and I didn't ever want them to feel like they were abandoned, or I never wanted them to feel like that they were...
Yeah. And I think I expected that of you. And if the kids were in trouble, or were doing something and busy at church, I would often look to my wife and say,
yeah,
the kids. And she would be straight onto it and get onto them. And so I think we had that good sense of communication and responsibility. We knew each other's roles, and we were able to function in that.
Yeah, and it's just right. It works, right? When you just rest in who God's created you to be, and you pray, and your husband loves God like he's supposed to, it flows down, and it's a good life.
Awesome. Very good. All right. Well, appreciate you tuning in with us tonight. Trust that some of this has ministered to you and helped you, ladies and husbands as well. And we're going to move on to some other things in the next few Manna Mondays. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. God bless.